Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Last week was a huge national story. The tariffs, the so-called trade war that was happening between the United States and China, driving a lot of people to talk about what impact the tariffs will have not only on consumers but also on the markets. And joining us to talk about that and to talk about what effect the tariffs have had so far on the markets is Courtney Toller with Viking Trading Group, LLC. And Courtney, welcome to the Chad Hasty Show. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you on the program. As I mentioned before I brought you on here, the tariffs last week, obviously a huge story, a lot of people talking about them. There were predictions of doom and gloom and that this was going to cause the economy to crash and that the economy was that everything was going to change. What are we seeing so far as the markets responding to the tariffs that the president put into place last week?
Yeah, so basically what happened was this whole thing started back in July of last year, and specifically what I trade is soybeans. And China is the biggest customer of soybeans in the world. They purchase, in 2017, they purchased up to 60% of the U.S. crops. So they're a big customer of the U.S. And so this was a huge deal for the soybean market in particular. And basically that happened last summer. It was announced that this whole trade war was starting, which, there were rumors about it starting early in 2018. But basically what happened was last year we had another huge crop in the U.S. Last year. And so that in combination with the trade war with China, we've seen a depression in prices, and we've since been kind of trading in a relatively tight range. But recently, when in early May the trade talks kind of went sour again, that was kind of the last straw that broke the camel's back in the markets, and we sold off to prices that we haven't seen in over 10 years. Basically, we haven't seen soybeans trade this low since 2008. So, while the general market is kind of hanging in there in terms of, the stock market, the soybeans are really taking a beating here.
So what needs to be done for obviously those in the soybean industry, but also throughout, the agricultural world here in the United States? What needs to be done to get those prices back where they need to be?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's going to be a difficult task because, like I said, China is such a dominant player in terms of demand for our crops. But countries like Canada and Mexico could step in. But, again, they're more buyers of corn versus soybeans. And so if you look at kind of a pie chart of the top 10, basically the reason China needs our soybeans is because that's what they use to feed their animals. They're the biggest hog producer and consumer of the world. And if you look at a pie chart of the top 10 hog producers of the world, they're 53% of that chart. And the second place is the European Union at 23%. So they're significantly behind. So it would take a lot in order to transfer that demand elsewhere. So really, we really need a trade deal with China, and that's kind of what everyone's hoping for.
The actions that the president has taken, is this hurting or helping, or is it a long-term play, in your opinion, for the president when it comes to ag producers?
It's definitely helping 100%. I mean, he's stepping in. We don't really know the exact details of the plan, but a little bit of the details were released yesterday, and it was actually a little bit bearish soybean prices, meaning, it was kind of, the assistance program was a little bit bigger than I think people were expecting. The number being thrown around is that soybean producers are going to be getting a $2 per bushel credit for their crop, which is massive.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing that kind of is happening right now in the ag markets in general is we are having an extremely wet spring, and we're in the midst of planting our crops right now. And basically, we are record behind pace getting these crops in the ground. And corn is always planted before soybeans, and so corn is really kind of freaking out right now to the upside. Corn has erased a significant amount of the losses that it incurred after the trade talks kind of went sour because we're having such a problem getting the crops into the ground. Now we're kind of in a waiting period on the beans because there still is time to get beans into the ground, but it's not looking necessarily good in that respect.
Very interesting. Visiting with Courtney Toller with Viking Trading Group. Courtney, how do you think the ag producers are feeling right now about the current trade situation with the U.S. and China? Do you think they're hopeful that that things are going to get worked out?
I think they are. I think everybody is very hopeful, and from what I hear, farmers are still standing behind Trump and what he's doing, even though they're really going through a difficult time right now. Everybody is, incredibly uncertain about what's going to happen. It's a very fluid situation, as you know. The markets are affected anytime Trump says anything about the trade war on Twitter. And then in addition to that, we're just dealing with these severe weather issues that we haven't seen weather like this in 125 years. I mean, this is definitely an interesting story brewing in the ag markets. Yeah,
very interesting. Courtney Toller, Viking Trading Group. Appreciate your time today, and appreciate the insight into what the ag industry is looking at market-wise.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, that's Courtney Toller here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO.